The platform smelled of brake pad smoke and other people's hopes for vacation. Margaret Harrison stepped onto the train car's footboard, feeling the heavy backpack pull her shoulders back. 7 days at the beach. 7 days without Andrew, without his endless meetings, without household obligations. Just her, the ocean climate, and a chance to catch up on sleep. Her husband had insisted on this trip 2 weeks ago when she complained about being tired. He bought the tickets, booked the hotel, even packed half her things. "Rest, darling. You've earned it," he'd said then, kissing her cheek. The conductor was already reaching out to take her ticket when someone's fingers dug into Margaret's wrist. The jerk was sharp, almost rough. She lost her balance and nearly fell off the footboard. "What are you doing?" Margaret turned around, ready to protest. "My train is leaving!" Before her stood an elderly woman in a faded headscarf with a basket of turnovers in her hands. Her face was tired, weathered, but her eyes, sharp, wary. "You can't get on this car," the stranger said quickly, not releasing Margaret's arm. "Did your husband buy the tickets?" Margaret nodded in confusion. The train was already starting to move. The conductor waved irritably. "Make up your mind. Are you coming or not?" "Come with me." The woman pulled Margaret back onto the platform. "I need to show you something, quickly." "You must be crazy." Margaret tried to break free, but the grip was surprisingly strong. "Let go of me immediately." "If I let go, you'll regret it later." The woman stubbornly pulled her toward the platform exit. "Come on, no time to explain." The train started moving, picking up speed. Margaret watched helplessly as the cars floated past. Vacation, ocean, quiet. Everything was floating away with the train. Indignation boiled inside. Some crazy vendor had ruined her trip. What was happening? But the woman wouldn't let go. She confidently led Margaret through the crowd of well-wishers, past kiosks, to a small cafe near the station's main entrance. There she finally stopped and nodded toward the window. "Look." Margaret came closer, still ready to unleash an angry tirade, but the words stuck in her throat. Behind the glass, in the back of the hall, at a table by the wall, sat Andrew, her husband. The same Andrew who had kissed her goodbye at their building entrance an hour ago and said he'd miss her. He was looking at his watch, sipping coffee, fidgeting in his chair, waiting for someone. It was obvious. "I've been selling turnovers here for 15 years, the woman beside her said quietly. "I see people. I remember them. I've seen you with him many times. You walked together. He held your arm. And then I started seeing him with another woman, with a baby in a stroller. At first I thought, maybe a sister, a relative. But no. I saw him kiss her, saw him play with the child. You understand?" Margaret was silent. She couldn't tear her eyes away from her husband. Andrew looked at his watch again, then at his phone, smiled at something on the screen, wrote a message. "When?" Margaret forced the words out with difficulty. "How long?" "The baby is about 6 months old, no more. Very small. A boy." 6 months. Half a year ago, Andrew had returned from a business trip with a bouquet of roses and promises that soon everything would work out for them. That doctors had found a new infertility treatment method, that they just needed to wait a little longer. Margaret had believed him. She always believed him. The cafe door opened. A young woman entered the hall, about 25, no more. Light hair, athletic figure, jeans, and a light hoodie. In front of her, a baby stroller. The woman wheeled the stroller to Andrew's table, and he instantly jumped up, kissed her, not on the cheek, not perfunctorily, on the lips, tenderly, long. Then he bent over the stroller, carefully ran his hand over the sleeping infant's head. His face glowed with such tenderness, such paternal pride, that Margaret felt everything inside her break. "You don't have children, right?" The turnover seller spoke carefully, almost sympathetically. "I know that too. You were talking on the phone once near my stand. About doctors, about tests. Sorry, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I could hear. Margaret nodded. Fragments of memories flashed through her mind. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of trying to have a child, endless examinations, hopes, disappointments. Andrew had always supported her, or pretended to. In the cafe, the young woman sat across from Andrew, took his hand across the table. They were talking about something, smiling. The stroller stood between them, a perfect family picture. Only there was no place for Margaret in this picture. A year ago he sat here with his mother, the vendor continued. Showed her photos on his phone. She gasped, rejoiced. Then they talked about some house. He gave her keys. His mother kept saying, "Thank you, son. Now I'll live in the countryside, work in the garden." And he replied, "Mom, this is for you and one other important person. Don't tell anyone yet." The cabin. The country house Andrew had bought last summer. Registered it in his mother Linda's name, supposedly to reduce taxes. The old woman really did love tending a garden, and Margaret hadn't suspected anything wrong. Moreover, Andrew had explained that some distant pregnant relative would temporarily live there, someone who needed a quiet place away from the city. A good deed, he'd said. We're helping someone. It all fit together. A house bought with their shared money, registered to a retiree, a pregnant relative who stayed there with her baby after giving birth. And Margaret was sent to the beach so they could spend a week living peacefully as a real family of 3. You needed to see this, the vendor said firmly. I don't know if I did the right thing, but I couldn't stay silent. You're a good person. I can see that. And him. She nodded contemptuously toward the cafe. I've seen enough men like that in my time. Margaret turned to her. The woman stood clutching her basket of turnovers, and in her kind, world-weary eyes there was genuine sympathy. Thank you, Margaret breathed. Thank you so much. What's your name? Dorothy Miller. The woman shrugged awkwardly. Sorry for pulling you off the train so roughly. There was no time to explain. No, you did the right thing. Margaret looked at the cafe one more time. Andrew was feeding his mistress a pastry from a fork. She was laughing. The infant woke up, whimpered, and Andrew immediately bent down, started rocking him. Skillfully, confidently, like an experienced father. Disgusting. She needed to leave. Immediately. Before she burst into that cafe and made a scene. No. Not now. Not like this. I need to go, she said, tearing her eyes away from the window with difficulty. Can I help you with anything? Dorothy shifted from foot to foot. Margaret nodded, remembering her friend. Her friend. Rachel. Yes, she lived 20 minutes away by car. Margaret took out her phone, dialed the number. They answered after the second ring. Maggie? What? You're already there? How's the beach? Rachel, I didn't leave. Can I come to your place? Right now. Her voice trembled despite all attempts to pull herself together. Of course. What happened? I'll explain later. I'll be there in half an hour. Margaret shoved the phone in her pocket and turned to Dorothy again. I don't know how to thank you. You saved me from a huge mistake. Good. Go to your friends. Rest. And then decide what to do. Dorothy took 2 turnovers wrapped in a napkin from her basket. Take these, with cabbage. Eat something at least. You're so pale. Margaret took the turnovers, nodded, and reached into her bag for money. But the vendor shook her head no, just patted her shoulder. Margaret headed for the exit. Her legs carried her automatically. Her head was buzzing. The station, the street, a taxi. She got in the back seat, gave the address. The driver was saying something about traffic, but she didn't hear. Margaret closed her eyes. Don't cry. Not now. Tears. Later. First, she needed to get to Rachel's, exhale, organize her thoughts. And then she'd decide what to do. The taxi stopped at the familiar building. Margaret paid, got out, went up to the 4th floor. Rachel was already standing in the doorway, tall, with a short haircut, in home pants, and an old t-shirt. They'd been friends since college, and Rachel always knew how to read her without words. God, Maggie, what's wrong with you? Her friend stepped forward, hugged her, pulled her into the apartment. Sit down, tell me. Margaret sank onto the couch, dropped her backpack on the floor, and only then, in the safety of the warm apartment, surrounded by bookshelves and the smell of fresh coffee, did she allow herself to cry. Not loudly, not hysterically, quietly, hopelessly, the way you cry when everything you believe in crumbles. Rachel silently handed her a box of tissues, sat down beside her, put her arm around her shoulders. Didn't ask questions, just was there, and that helped more than any words. When the tears dried up, Margaret straightened up, wiped her face, took a deep breath. Andrew has a mistress, and a son. He's 6 months old. Rachel froze. What? Margaret nodded and began to tell. About the station, about Dorothy, about the cafe, about the stroller and the kiss, about the cabin bought for his mother, about the pregnant relative who turned out to be a mistress with a baby, about the beach trip that was supposed to give Andrew a week of freedom. Rachel listened, and with each word, her face grew darker. Bastard, she finally breathed. 10 years, Margaret repeated dully. 10 years he swore we'd get through it, that we'd definitely have children. He took me to clinics, held my hand during procedures, and he got himself a young one and made a baby, Rachel finished harshly, and meanwhile removed assets from division by registering the cabin in his mom's name. Smart guy. Margaret flinched. She hadn't thought about it from that angle yet. But Rachel was right. The cabin was bought with their shared money. Margaret remembered well how they withdrew savings from their account. But it was registered to Linda. If divorce started, the house formally wouldn't be considered jointly acquired property. He robbed me, Margaret said slowly. He withdrew my money and built a nest for his mistress. Not just robbed, he used you. Rachel stood up, paced the room. Listen, did you call him? Tell him you didn't leave? No. And don't. At all. Let him think you're on the train. Rachel stopped, thinking. Maggie, we need a lawyer. A good, tough family law attorney. Tomorrow. A lawyer? Margaret looked at her friend in confusion. Yes, because right now you're in shock, you want to go make a scene. But that's the worst thing you can do. The scene, later. First, we need to understand what can be proven and how to act. Property, the cabin, money, all of this can be contested, but only if done right. Margaret was silent. Inside, resentment boiled, pain, a desire to scream. But Rachel was speaking sensibly. If she rushed to Andrew now, made a scene, he'd have time to prepare. Hide money, come up with a version. But if she acted quietly, coldly... You're right, Margaret exhaled. I need a lawyer. I have a contact. Michael Richardson specializes in family and property disputes. Worked with my sister when she was getting divorced. Good one. I'll write down his number. Rachel took her phone, typed something, then showed the screen to Margaret. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. he can see you. I already messaged him. Say you're from me. Margaret nodded. There was still burning in her chest, but something else appeared. Anger. Cold, sober determination. Andrew thought he'd pulled the wool over her eyes, sent his wife to the beach so he could peacefully play happy family. But he miscalculated. Thank you, Rachel. Don't mention it. You're staying with me tonight. Make yourself comfortable. I'll make us tea. You'll eat, rest, and tomorrow we'll start acting. Quietly and methodically. That night, Margaret barely slept. She lay on the couch in the living room, stared at the ceiling, and replayed the last few years in her head. Where did she miss the moment when Andrew started lying? Were there signs? Late nights at work? Trips? A new habit of password protecting his phone? All of that existed. But she'd attributed it to fatigue, to projects, to their shared conception problem that weighed on both of them. Now she understood. It wasn't about her. Andrew simply found a woman who could give him a child, and Margaret was no longer needed, except as a source of money and cover for his double life. But now he'd made a mistake. He'd underestimated her, thought she'd obediently board the train and spend a week lying on the beach while he built his happiness on her bones. Now everything had changed. She was no longer a victim. She was a player, and she would play in a way he'd never expect. Morning began with Margaret waking to the smell of coffee and the sound of running water. Rachel was bustling in the kitchen, humming something to herself. Outside the window stood a warm May day, sun breaking through the curtains, birds chirping in the yard. An ordinary, serene morning, if not for what happened yesterday. Margaret sat up on the couch. Her head was splitting from lack of sleep, her eyes swollen from tears. But inside, there was no longer that panic that had engulfed her at the station. What remained was a dull, aching pain and a strange clarity of thought, as if something had broken inside but simultaneously fallen into place. "Good morning," Rachel appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs. "Coffee? Strong. You'll need it today." Margaret accepted the mug, took a sip. Hot, bitter, but exactly what she needed. "Thank you. For everything." "Don't thank me ahead of time." Rachel settled into the chair across from her. "There's still a lot of work ahead. I was thinking all night. We need to compile a complete picture of what he did, like in accounting, an inventory. Only not of goods, but of lies." "Inventory of lies," Margaret repeated and smiled bitterly. Sad, but accurate. "Exactly. Because you need to go to the lawyer not just with emotions but with facts, dates, amounts, documents. The more specifics we have, the better. So let's go in order. How long have you been married?" 10 years. Margaret took another sip of coffee. "Is the apartment jointly owned?" "Yes. We bought it 3 years after the wedding. A 2-bedroom registered to both of us. We paid the mortgage in half, though the last 2 years I paid more. My salary increased when I moved up to senior accountant." Rachel nodded, writing something in a notebook. "Next. When did talk about children start?" Margaret tensed. This was still the most painful topic. "About 1.5 years after the wedding. We weren't using contraception, but nothing was happening. At first we thought, well, it takes time. Then a year passed, then another. We went to doctors. Both got tested. They found hormone problems with me, said the chances were reduced but not zero. Andrew was healthy. The doctor said everything was excellent on his side. So he knew perfectly well he could have children." "Yes, he knew." Margaret squeezed the mug in her hands. "But he always said it didn't matter, that we'd manage, that we'd try different methods. He even agreed to IVF, even though it's expensive. We tried twice. It didn't work. After the second failure, I completely fell apart, wanted to give up. And he supported me, said everything was ahead, that we just needed to wait a little, that he loved me even without children." "While he was seeing his mistress and making her a baby," Rachel added dryly. Margaret nodded. The words burned, but it was the truth. "So the affair started at least 1.5 years ago," her friend continued, counting in her head. "The baby is 6 months old now, plus 9 months of pregnancy. Did you notice anything strange then?" Margaret thought, trying to remember. 1.5 years ago, last spring. What was happening then? "He started staying late at work more," she said slowly. "Said it was a new project, a complex site, needed to control everything personally. I wasn't surprised. He always had responsible work. Also, yes, he bought a new phone and put a password on it. Before, we could freely take each other's phones. But then he suddenly started hiding the screen when I was nearby." "And you didn't ask?" "I asked. He said I was exaggerating, that we needed to trust each other, and I believed him." Margaret rubbed her temples. God, how blind I was. You weren't blind. You were deceived. Those are different things. Rachel set aside the notebook. Good. Now about the cabin. When did he buy it? Last summer, in July. Said he found an affordable option outside the city, about an hour-and-a-half drive. A small house, 6 acres. Said he'd register it in his mother's name so taxes would be lower, and she could live there in summer, work in the garden. Linda really does love all that. Seedlings, beds. She's 64, retired, has plenty of time. How much did the cabin cost? $12,000. We both contributed. We had a joint savings account. We were saving for a car. There was about $12,000 there. We withdrew almost all of it. So you also paid for this cabin? Yes, half. Rachel wrote something down again. And when did this pregnant relative appear? Margaret strained her memory. In September, he mentioned her for the first time, said it was a distant cousin of his mother's, living in another city, had a difficult family situation, got pregnant, but had nowhere to live. He offered to let her stay at the cabin until she gave birth and got on her feet. I agreed, even helped, bought bedding, dishes, wanted to meet her, but he said the girl was shy, worried, better not to impose. Of course, Rachel smirked. Shy to the point she never saw you. Convenient. Margaret thought about it. She really had helped set up a nest for her husband's mistress, bought things, cared about comfort, and Andrew played the role of a caring relative, hiding behind nobility. I was never at that cabin after September, she said quietly. Andrew said we shouldn't bother the girl, that she was nervous, pregnancy was difficult. Promised to take me there in spring when she left. And he went there every week, on weekends, supposedly helping his mother with the garden. And was his mother in on it? I don't know. Margaret shook her head. Linda was always on his side. But she's not a mean woman, just loves her son too much. Maybe he lied to her too, or she knew and stayed silent. That will come out. Rachel sipped her coffee. Next, the beach trip. When did he suggest it? 2 weeks ago, mid-May. I came home from work tired, complained I had no strength. Here's a report, there's a tax audit, everything at once. And he suddenly says, "Darling, you need a rest. Go to the beach for a week. I'll arrange everything." I refused at first, said I didn't want to leave him alone. But he insisted, bought tickets for yesterday's train, booked a hotel in Miami Beach, even helped pack. Because he needed that week, Rachel stated. A week when he could peacefully live with his mistress and child at the cabin, not afraid you'd find out. He probably planned to play happy family. Margaret closed her eyes. Yes, it all fit. Send the legal wife far away to enjoy time with the other family, the one he'd truly chosen. You know what's most offensive? She opened her eyes, and tears glistened in them. Yesterday morning, when he was seeing me off, I thought how caring he was, how lucky I was with him, that we had a strong marriage, despite all the difficulties. And at that moment, he was thinking about how many hours were left until I left, and he'd finally be free. Rachel stood up, came over, put her arm around her shoulders. Maggie, stop beating yourself up. You're not to blame. He's a scumbag, and you're a normal person. A wife who trusted her husband. That's not a crime. But I should have noticed. No, you shouldn't have. Because trust is normal, but betrayal isn't. Rachel straightened up. And now we'll make sure he pays for it, and not just morally, but financially. He stole your money, time, emotions, time to pay the debts. Margaret wiped her eyes and nodded. Rachel was right. Self-pity later. Now she needed to act. What else do you need to know? Do you have other accounts, deposits, besides the one you withdrew from for the cabin? Yes. I have my own salary account, he has his. But there's a joint card that we both transfer money to for current expenses. Usually has 50 to 70,000 on it. Don't touch it yet. Don't give him reason to think you suspect something, Margaret thought. Right. Andrew shouldn't know she's aware. Otherwise, he'd start hiding money, re-registering something else, preparing for divorce, and her task was to get ahead of him. By the way, Rachel glanced at her watch, you need to text him. Something normal, so he thinks you're on the train. Otherwise, he'll start calling, worrying, and then realize something's wrong. Margaret took out her phone. 15 missed calls from Andrew. 3 messages. Maggie, how was the trip? Everything okay? Maggie, are you sleeping or what? Please answer. Starting to worry. Send at least an emoji. She clenched her teeth. How well he played the caring husband. Wonder if he was simultaneously writing such messages to his mistress? What should I write? Something calm, Rachel suggested. Like apologize for the silence, say you were tired yesterday, went to bed early, phone died. Everything's fine, the trip was good, the ocean is beautiful, you'll go to the beach soon. Margaret typed a message, reread it, sent it. A minute later came a reply. I was so worried. Good that everything's okay. Rest, get some sun. I love you. I love you. 3 words that used to warm her heart, and now only caused a smirk. Okay, put the phone away, Rachel ordered. And don't think about him until the meeting with the lawyer, which by the way is in an hour. Come on, get yourself together, have breakfast. You need to pull yourself together. Margaret obediently went to the bathroom. Washed up, trying to reduce the swelling around her eyes. Looked at her reflection. Pale, with dark circles under her eyes, hair disheveled. Not the best look for an important meeting. She combed her hair, pulled it into a ponytail, then returned to the kitchen where her friend had already set the table. Scrambled eggs, toast, cheese. Eat, you need strength. Margaret ate half the portion, couldn't manage more, but felt better. Her stomach stopped churning, her head cleared. At 9:30, they left the house. The lawyer's office was downtown, in an old mansion converted into a business center. They went up to the 2nd floor, found the right door. The sign read, Michael Richardson, Legal Services. Rachel rang the bell. A man of about 45 opened the door, graying hair, strict suit, attentive gaze. Rachel? He nodded. Come in. You must be Margaret. Yes, she exhaled. The office was small but cozy. Bookshelves, a wide desk, leather chairs. It smelled of coffee. Michael gestured for them to sit, settled behind the desk himself. Rachel briefly outlined the situation, he began, taking out a notebook. But I need the full picture. Tell me in order. Take your time. Everything you consider important. And Margaret told him. About the station, about the cafe, about the child, about 10 years of marriage, about infertility, about the cabin, about the relative, about the beach trip. Michael listened, nodding, making notes, asking clarifying questions. When she finished, he thought for a moment. I see. The situation is depressing for you personally, but you need to be patient. Moreover, you have cards he probably doesn't even think about. Which ones? Margaret leaned forward. First, the cabin. It was bought during the marriage, with joint money. Formally, the owner is his mother, but this is called a sham transaction. If we prove that the money came from your accounts, that the house was used by both of you, that registering it to a retiree was just a legal trick, the court will recognize it as jointly acquired property and include it in the division. And how do we prove it? Account statements, correspondence, if messages about the purchase are preserved, witnesses, if anyone knew about the house's true purpose. Even that woman from the station's testimony could be useful. She saw how he visited there with his mistress and child, meaning the house was used not by his mother, but by him. Margaret nodded. Dorothy. Yes, maybe she'd agree to testify. Second, Michael continued, the apartment. It's in joint ownership, so it's divided in half. But if you prove you paid more on the mortgage in recent years, you can demand a larger share. I have all the payment receipts. Excellent. Keep them. What about the joint account? Divided in half. But if there's money there now, don't touch it until the divorce. Let everything stay as is. Margaret listened, and with each word, something strange like hope grew inside. Maybe not everything was lost. Maybe she really could get back at least part of what was stolen from her. What about the affair? Rachel asked. Does that play a role? The affair itself isn't grounds for unequal property division, Michael explained, but it strengthens your moral position. The court considers circumstances. If the husband deceived for years, removed assets, built a parallel family, this speaks to his bad faith. It won't automatically give you everything, but it gives weight in negotiations. Margaret nodded slowly. So she had leverage. She wasn't a helpless victim. She could pressure, demand, achieve justice. What should I do next? First, don't tell your husband you know everything. Not yet. Michael leaned forward, looking directly into her eyes. You go home, act normal. He thinks you're unaware. This gives us time to gather evidence. Second, collect all financial documents, statements, receipts, correspondence. Everything related to the cabin, apartment, accounts. Third, prepare witnesses. That woman from the station is a key figure. And finally, don't sign anything he offers you. No agreements, powers of attorney, contracts, nothing. Okay. Margaret nodded. And when do we start? As soon as you're ready. Usually gathering documents takes a week or two. Then I'll file a lawsuit for divorce and property division. We'll simultaneously contest the cabin transaction. Your husband will receive a summons to court and realize the game is over. What if he tries to hide something? That's why speed and secrecy are important. The less he suspects, the better. We strike fast, hard, and he doesn't have time to react. Margaret exhaled. There was a plan. Clear, understandable, real. She was no longer drowning in chaos. She knew what to do. Thank you, she said. Thank you so much. You're welcome. It's my job. Michael smiled for the first time during the whole conversation. And you know what? I've seen many such cases. Honest people win more often than they think. You just need to act correctly. They left the office. Outside it was warm, sunny. People hurried about their business, smiled, talked on phones. An ordinary spring day, and Margaret's life had changed. Well? Rachel looked at her. How do you feel? Strange, Margaret admitted. It still hurts, but not so scary anymore. Now I know what to do. That's excellent. Her friend put her arm around her shoulders. Let's go to my place, collect all the documents you have, and then you'll continue living as if nothing happened. Only now you're not a victim. You're a warrior, and you'll win. Margaret nodded. Yes, she was a warrior, and Andrew would find out about it very soon. The next 3 days Margaret spent in Rachel's apartment, methodically dismantling her past brick by brick. They sat at a table piled with papers, like investigators over a particularly important case. And in a sense, that's exactly what it was. Here's the joint account statement for the last 3 years. Margaret handed her friend a printout. See this transfer for $11,200? July 19th last year. That's for the cabin. Rachel marked the line with a highlighter. And here are my mortgage payments. Margaret laid out receipts. Since January last year, I've been paying $2,000 monthly. Andrew, $1,200. He explained he was having temporary financial difficulties at work, bonus delays, asked me to help. I, of course, helped. Of course, Rachel noted dryly, while he was spending money on maintaining his mistress. Great. This goes in the pile. What else? Margaret took out her phone, opened the correspondence with her husband. Here are messages about the cabin, June last year. He writes, I found a great option outside the city. Inexpensive, perfect for Mom. We'll register it in her name. Taxes will be lower. You don't mind? I answered, if Mom likes it, of course. Then Mom is thrilled. Only we need to decide quickly, or someone will snatch it up. Should we withdraw from savings? And you agreed. Yes. We saved that money together. Thought if it's for the family, why not? What an idiot I was. Stop it. Rachel took her hand. You're not an idiot. You're a normal wife who trusted her husband. He's the scumbag, not you the fool. Remember that. Margaret nodded, though self-flagellation didn't pass. Each new proof of Andrew's lies hurt more than the previous one, but simultaneously made her stronger. Anger was excellent fuel for action. And here's correspondence about the relative, she scrolled further. He wrote, "Remember I told you about my cousin Jennifer from Charlotte? She has problems, she's pregnant, husband left her. Mom suggested living at the cabin. I think it's right, to help someone." I answered, "Of course, let her live there, poor girl. Maybe I should meet her, support her." He, "No need, she's very shy. Better give her peace." Jennifer from Charlotte, Rachel smirked. Wonder what the mistress's real name is? Though it doesn't matter. The main thing is we have proof. He admits a woman is living at the cabin, and he goes there regularly. I also have a photo of the cabin. Margaret found a picture in her gallery. Andrew sent it in August, wrote, "Here's our family nest. We'll visit together soon." The photo showed a neat brick house with a porch, apple trees in the garden, flower beds. Cozy, sweet, a family nest. Only not for their family. "Send all this to Michael." Rachel wrote down the lawyer's email address. "The more material, the better. And don't forget that woman from the station's contact. Dorothy Miller. I wrote down her number when we said goodbye. She said she's ready to help if needed." "Perfect. Call her tonight, explain the situation. Ask her to give written testimony about what she saw. Michael said this could be important evidence." Margaret nodded and added it to her to-do list. In 3 days, the list had grown to 2 pages of small handwriting. Collect apartment documents. Find receipts for furniture they bought together. Request a full transaction statement from the bank. Photograph everything valuable in the apartment, in case Andrew tries to hide something after divorce starts. "Do you think his mother knows?" Rachel asked. "I don't know," Margaret thought. "Linda has always been strange. I wouldn't say we were close. She loves her son. For her, he's perfect. When we couldn't have children, she hinted a couple times that maybe the problem was with me, that her Andrew was healthy as an ox. But in general, it was unpleasant. So she could well have been covering his affair. Quite possible. If he told her his mistress would soon give her a grandson, which I supposedly couldn't give birth to, his mother could have been happy. The main thing, continuation of the line." Rachel grimaced. "Disgusting. Well, nothing. She'll answer in court too. At minimum for the fraudulent cabin transaction." Margaret imagined Linda receiving a summons and involuntarily smiled. Her mother-in-law would be shocked. Her precious son got into trouble, and all because of his own vileness. "By the way, about court." Margaret looked at her watch. "Today's Friday. Michael said by the beginning of next week I need to bring him all collected materials. Think we'll make it?" "We'll make it. We still have 2 days. Tomorrow you'll go home, get the rest of the documents, and Sunday we'll systematize everything and give it to the lawyer." "Home," Margaret repeated, and something jumped inside. "I'll have to see Andrew. Explain why I came back early. Talk to him. Pretend I don't know anything." "Can you?" "I don't know." She rubbed her temples. "I'm afraid I'll snap. That I'll yell at him, say everything. But I can't. Not yet." "Then let's rehearse." Rachel stood up. "Come on, I'll be Andrew. You enter the apartment," I say, surprised. "Darling, why aren't you at the beach? You should still be there." Margaret sighed but entered the role. "I changed my mind," she tried to speak calmly. "I missed you, and the weather turned bad. Decided to come back." "But the hotel? The tickets? The money will be wasted." "It's okay. They refunded the money. I just want to be home." Rachel nodded. "Not bad. But add a smile. You supposedly don't suspect anything, remember? Show slight fatigue, but not anger." Margaret tried to smile. It came out crooked. "God, I'm a terrible actress. You're fine. The main thing, keep emotions under control. Answer briefly, without details. Say your head hurts, you want to lie down. He won't insist on conversations if you're feeling unwell. And if he asks why the phone was unavailable, say you forgot the charger, phone died. Charged it at the hotel, wrote to him, then just decided to come back. Simple. Margaret nodded. The plan was logical. The main thing, don't overact. Be natural, as much as possible in a situation when everything inside was boiling with hatred. That evening she called Dorothy. The woman answered after the third ring. Hello. Dorothy? It's Margaret Harrison. We met at the station on Wednesday. Margaret, how are you? Forgive me, I've been thinking about you. Wasn't I wrong to stop you? No, you did the right thing. Thank you so much. I'd like to ask for your help. Of course, dear. How can I be useful? I'm divorcing my husband. Filed for property division. The lawyer says your testimony could be very important. You saw my husband with that woman and child. It's proof he was leading a double life and using our cabin for his mistress. Dorothy tisked on the other end of the line. What a bastard. Well, of course I'll help. What needs to be done? Write a written statement. When, where, and what you saw. Dates, if you remember. How they behaved. Everything that can confirm their relationship. I'll write it down. I have a good memory. I remember a lot. I'll give you everything you need. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't mention it, dear. Men like that need to be punished, so others learn. Margaret said goodbye and hung up. Another item completed. The to-do list was shrinking, and confidence was growing. On Saturday morning, she prepared to go home. Rachel walked her to the door. Remember, calm, natural, no hints. You just came back early, that's all. Got it. And if anything, call. Anytime. I'm available. Thank you, Rachel. Really, thank you. Without you, I would have gone crazy. Nonsense, you're strong. You just needed support right now, and that's what I'm here for. They hugged. Margaret went outside, called a taxi. The drive home took 20 minutes. The whole way she repeated to herself, calm, smile, tired. I don't know anything, don't suspect anything. The building entrance greeted her with familiar silence. Margaret went up to her floor, got out keys, opened the door. The apartment smelled of coffee. Footsteps came from the kitchen, and Andrew appeared, in home pants and a t-shirt, with a mug in hand. Seeing her, he froze. The mug trembled. Maggie? He blinked, as if not believing his eyes. How are you? You should be in Miami. Hi. Margaret forced a tired smile. I changed my mind. I missed you, and the weather there was bad. Decided to come back. But the hotel, you paid. It's okay, not a big loss. They refunded the rest. She took off her windbreaker, hung it on the rack. I just wanted to be home. My head hurts. I want to lie in my own bed. Andrew set the mug on the table, came over, tried to hug her. Margaret allowed it, though every cell in her body screamed, push him away, hit him, scream. But she silently stood in his embrace for a few seconds, then gently freed herself. Sorry, I really don't feel well. I'll go lie down. Maybe tea? A pill? No thanks. Just need to sleep. She went into the bedroom, closed the door. The room was the same as a week ago. Wide bed, closet, nightstands, their shared bedroom. Only now Margaret knew. Here he went to bed and thought about another woman. Here he woke up and planned how to spend weekends with his mistress. Here he lied. She lay on the bed, closed her eyes. She needed to hold on, just a little longer, collect documents, give them to the lawyer, start the process. And then, a strike, one that Andrew wouldn't recover from. Behind the door, his footsteps sounded. He was walking around the apartment, muttering something to himself, probably nervous. Her early arrival clearly wasn't in his plans. Wonder if he'd already canceled the meeting with his mistress. Or was she sitting at the cabin now waiting for him to come? Margaret smirked. Let her wait. Soon neither of them would be in the mood for dates. She lay in the bedroom until evening, pretending to sleep. Actually methodically photographing documents she'd taken from the closet, the cabin purchase agreement, bank statements, receipts, sending everything to Rachel and Michael. By dinner, she came out to the kitchen, ate a little salad, again cited a headache, and returned to the bedroom. Andrew was unusually caring, offered tea, massage, medicine, played the role of the perfect husband. Margaret barely restrained herself from laughing in his face, or crying, or screaming, but she held on. Actress, warrior, player. Sunday morning she said she was going to a colleague's, needed to discuss a work project. Andrew didn't object, even seemed relieved. Probably got the opportunity to call his mistress without risk of being overheard. At Rachel's, they spread all collected materials on the table. Impressive, Rachel nodded. This is enough to sink him up to his ears. I hope so. Margaret put everything in a folder. Tomorrow I'll take it to Michael. He said he'd immediately start preparing the lawsuit. And are you ready? For what? For war. Because when he gets the court summons, a war will begin. Margaret looked at the folder in her hands, at the fruits of 3 days' work, at the evidence of betrayal, lies, theft, and inside something finally broke. Yes, she said firmly. I'm ready. Monday at 10 a.m., she was sitting in Michael Richardson's office handing him the folder. The lawyer studied the documents, nodded, made notes, finally set aside the papers and looked at Margaret. Excellent work. This is more than enough. I'll prepare a lawsuit for divorce and property division. Simultaneously, I'll file an application to contest the cabin transaction as fraudulent. Your husband will receive a summons in about a week. By then, everything will be ready. What should I do? For now, nothing. Live your normal life. When he gets the papers, he'll most likely try to talk to you, pressure you, maybe threaten. Don't give in. Don't sign anything. All negotiations only through me. Understood? Understood. And one more thing. Michael leaned forward. Prepare for him to try to manipulate. He'll swear his love, beg forgiveness, promise to return everything. It's standard tactics. Don't fall for it. I won't. I've already decided everything. Good. Then see you in court. Prepare to win. You've earned it. Leaving the office, Margaret felt a strange lightness, as if she'd shed an enormous weight. The decision was made. It couldn't be undone. She took out her phone, texted Rachel. Case is in motion. In a week he'll know. The reply came instantly. You're amazing. Proud of you. Margaret smiled and headed to the subway. Ahead was a week of waiting, a week of pretending, the last week of her old life, and then a new one would begin. Without lies, without Andrew, without illusions, only truth, however bitter it might be. The week dragged on painfully slowly. Margaret went to work, came home, had dinner with Andrew, talked about weather and news, everything as usual. Only inside her a timer was ticking. 6 more days, 5 more, 4 more. Andrew was acting strange, sometimes too affectionate, sometimes distant. Several times she caught his studying gaze on her, as if he was trying to understand whether she knew something. But Margaret kept her face, smiled when needed, complained about work fatigue, discussed where to vacation in summer, the perfect, unsuspecting wife. In the evenings, when Andrew fell asleep, she lay beside him and stared into the darkness, thought about how her life would change in a few days. Divorce, property division, selling this apartment, starting from scratch. Scary? Yes, but not as scary as continuing to live in lies. Wednesday evening, Andrew said that on Saturday he'd go to his mother's, help with the garden. Margaret nodded without showing emotion. Of course he'd go. To his mother, to the cabin, to his mistress and child, as always. Maybe I should come with you, Margaret suddenly suggested. I'll help your mom. Andrew almost choked on his tea. No, thanks. He tried to speak calmly. I have a lot to do. I'll give her your regards. You'd better rest. Margaret shrugged. As you wish. He clearly exhaled with relief. Thursday, Michael sent a message. Documents filed. Summons will be served Friday or Monday. Hang in there. Margaret reread the message 3 times. That's it. The point of no return was past. Tomorrow or the day after, Andrew would find out she knew. That she'd filed for divorce. That his carefully constructed world of lies was crumbling. Friday, she went to work as usual. All day, checked her phone. Had Andrew called? But the phone was silent. So the summons hadn't been served yet. Maybe Monday. Evening, she came home. Andrew was home, cooking dinner. Pasta with sauce. It smelled of basil and garlic. He smiled at her when she entered. Hi, how was your day? Fine, tired. Margaret went to the room, changed. They had dinner in silence. Andrew was saying something about work, about a difficult client, about weekend plans. Margaret listened with half an ear, nodded. Thought that this might be their last peaceful dinner. In just a few days there would be shouting, accusations, scandals here. That night she barely slept. Lay and listened to how Andrew breathed beside her, evenly, calmly, without the slightest hint of remorse. He slept like a baby, and she couldn't close her eyes. Saturday morning, Andrew got ready to go to his mother's. Backpack, rubber boots, old jacket, everything proper for garden work. Well, I'm off, he pecked Margaret on the cheek. I'll be back tomorrow evening. Okay, give my regards. He left. The door closed. Margaret went to the window, followed his car with her eyes. There he gets in the driver's seat. There he drives out of the yard, going to his real family, and she stays here, alone, but no longer a victim, already a hunter. She took out her phone, called Rachel. Hi, did he leave? Yes, to the cabin, to them. How are you? Fine, strange but fine. It doesn't hurt anymore, just empty. That will pass. Hang on a little longer. Soon everything will be resolved. I know. They chatted a few more minutes, then Margaret hung up. The day dragged endlessly. She cleaned the apartment, did laundry, cooked, tried to distract herself. Didn't work. Thoughts returned to Andrew. Wonder what he's doing now. Playing with his son, kissing his mistress, making plans for a future that doesn't include Margaret. Evening, a message came from Michael. Summons received this afternoon. Your husband got notification through the government services app, awaiting his reaction. Her heart stopped. So Andrew already knew. Right now, at the cabin, surrounded by his second family, he'd received a notification that would destroy all his plans. Margaret imagined his face. Shock, disbelief, then fury. He's probably trying to understand now how this happened. When did she find out? How long was she silent? What else does she know? The phone rang. Andrew. Of course. Margaret looked at the name lighting up. 5 rings, 10, 15. She declined the call. A minute later, another call. She muted the sound. Messages started coming. Maggie, this is some mistake. Call me, please. We need to talk. I'm coming over now. Margaret didn't answer. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Insistent, long. Andrew had arrived. Fast. Dropped his mistress with the child and rushed here. So the panic was real. Maggie, open up. I know you're home. His voice was breaking, almost hysterical. She stood in the hallway, 2 meters from the door, and was silent. The door was closed and on the internal latch, so it couldn't be opened from outside. Maggie, please. This is a misunderstanding. We need to talk. The bell. Knocking. Shouting. The neighbors could definitely hear. But Margaret didn't move. Let him shout. Let the whole building know what he is. Finally, the knocking stopped. Footsteps receded. Margaret looked through the peephole. Empty. He'd left. Margaret dialed Michael Richardson's number. My husband came here, knocked on the door. I didn't open it. Correct. Don't open if you're afraid. Don't talk. If he starts threatening, call the police. We have everything necessary for the case. His emotions right now only hurt him. Okay. Tomorrow's Sunday. Monday is the first hearing on contesting the cabin transaction. Be ready. Margaret disconnected and closed her eyes. It had begun. War. And there was nowhere to retreat. Sunday she spent at her friend's. Andrew was blowing up her phone, calling from different numbers, writing from all possible messengers. Margaret didn't answer. Michael had advised complete ignoring, and she followed the advice. Maggie, what are you doing? All this can be resolved. Why are you involving lawyers? I love you. We can fix everything. You'll regret this. The last message was an open threat. Margaret took a screenshot, sent it to Michael. Let it be in the case. Proof that Andrew was trying to pressure her. Monday morning, she was ready for the first court hearing. Determined. She looked like someone who came to fight and win. The courthouse was downtown, in an old building with columns. Margaret climbed the steps, went through metal detector frames. In the corridor, Michael was already waiting, in a dark suit with a briefcase. Good morning. Ready? Yes. Excellent. Now there'll be a preliminary hearing on contesting the transaction. Present will be your husband, his mother, as the formal cabin owner, and representatives of both sides. The judge will hear positions, schedule the main session. You just need to sit and listen. I'll do the talking. They entered the courtroom. A small room, judge's table, seats for parties. Margaret sat next to Michael. A minute later, Andrew entered. With him was a man in glasses, his lawyer apparently. Andrew looked terrible, disheveled, nervous. Seeing Margaret, he froze. Maggie. Mr. Harrison. Michael cut him off sharply. Please refrain from communicating with my client. All questions are resolved through representatives. Andrew sat in his seat. His lawyer was whispering something to him, trying to calm him down. The door opened again. Linda entered. Her mother-in-law was confused, frightened. Seeing Margaret, she gasped. Maggie, dear, what's happening? Andrew said it's some mistake. Mrs. Harrison. Michael stood up. Please sit down. Everything will be clarified now. The judge entered exactly at 10. A woman of about 50, strict, with a cold gaze. She sat down, opened the case, looked at those present. Hearing case on the lawsuit of Margaret Harrison to contest the purchase transaction of a country house. She addressed Michael. Plaintiff's representative, state the essence of the claims. Michael stood up, began speaking clearly, calmly. Explained that the cabin was bought during marriage with the spouse's joint money, but registered in the defendant's mother's name. That this was a sham transaction aimed at hiding property from division. That the plaintiff had the right to half the house's value. Andrew's lawyer objected. Said the house was bought as a gift to his mother, that she was the legal owner, that the claims were groundless. The judge listened, made notes, then addressed Linda. Mrs. Harrison, you claim the house belongs to you? Yes, her mother-in-law nodded. My son gave it to me. For the garden. Did you have funds for the purchase? No, but my son. So your son bought it and registered it in your name? Yes. And where did your son get the funds? Linda hesitated. Andrew paled. Well, he works, earns. Michael stood up. Your Honor, I have bank statements confirming that the money for the purchase was withdrawn from the Harrisons' joint account. Half the amount belonged to my client. I request this be added to the case. He handed documents to the judge. She studied them, nodded. Accepted. The case is postponed for 2 weeks for additional study of materials. Next session May 29th at 2 p.m. Attendance is mandatory. Session adjourned. Margaret stood up. Her legs were cotton, but she held on. Michael was gathering papers, saying something to her, but she didn't hear. All her concentration was on Andrew, who sat with his head in his hands. Linda approached her. Maggie, dear, why are you doing this? This is family. We're family. We were. Margaret answered quietly. We were family, but not anymore. Her mother-in-law sobbed, turned away. Andrew raised his head, looked at Margaret. In his eyes was a mixture of anger, despair, and something else. Maybe regret, or maybe just anger that his plans had failed. Are you serious? He asked hoarsely. You really want to destroy everything we had? Margaret smirked. Andrew, we had nothing. There was only your lies and my trust. She turned and left the courtroom. Michael caught up with her in the corridor. Excellently done. The judge is on our side, I can see it. The cabin will be recognized as joint property. What about the apartment? The divorce and property division case is running in parallel. First hearing in a week. It's simpler there. The apartment is registered to both, divided in half. So I'll have to sell my half, or buy out his. Most likely the apartment will be sold and the money divided. That's standard practice, but we can try to negotiate for him to buy out your share or vice versa. Depends on his position. Margaret nodded. So the apartment was no longer hers. She'd need to look for housing, rent or save for something new, start from scratch. But that was later. And now she was walking down the courthouse corridor with her head held high. Winner of the first round. That evening, Rachel called. Well, did you survive? Survived. Michael says everything's going well. I knew it. Maggie, you're amazing. I'm proud of you. Thanks. But there are still a bunch of hearings ahead. Nothing. You'll manage. You've already proven you're stronger than you thought. Margaret hung up and looked out the window. Outside was a warm May evening, the sun setting over the horizon. Beautiful, peaceful. Somewhere out there, at the cabin, Andrew was experiencing the collapse of his world, trying to understand how everything went wrong, how the wife he considered weak and manageable suddenly turned out to be an opponent capable of fighting back. And Margaret sat by the window and for the first time in a long while felt not pain, not resentment, but something else. Relief. Freedom. The truth was on her side, and truth was winning. Slowly, through courts and lawyers. But winning. The 2 weeks between sessions flew by like one day. Margaret lived on autopilot, work, meetings with the lawyer, preparing documents. She and Andrew no longer talked or saw each other. Everything went through lawyers. Andrew tried several times to make contact, sent long messages with apologies, promises, pleas to give him a chance to explain everything. Margaret didn't answer. There was nothing to explain. The facts spoke for themselves. In June, the final hearing on the cabin took place. The judge heard both sides, studied materials, and made a decision. Recognized the transaction as fraudulent, include the cabin in the jointly acquired property of the Harrisons. The house's value was estimated at $13,000. Prices for country real estate had risen slightly over the year, so Margaret was entitled to half, $6,500. Linda cried right in the courtroom. Andrew sat with a stone face. His lawyer tried to object to something, but the judge was inflexible. The decision would take effect in 10 days if no appeal was filed. Will there be an appeal? Margaret asked Michael when they left the courthouse. I doubt it. They have no chance. The evidence is too convincing. Most likely they'll agree to a settlement. Simpler and cheaper. That's how it turned out. 3 days later, Andrew's lawyer contacted Michael and proposed settling everything without further courts. Andrew agreed to the following terms. The apartment is sold, money divided in half. The cabin is sold, money divided in half. Joint savings in accounts divided in half. Divorce formalized without mutual claims. Agree, Michael advised. This is a fair offer. In court, we'd get about the same, but would spend more months and a ton of nerves. This way, quick, clear, and you're free. Margaret agreed. She signed the settlement agreement in mid-June. By the end of June, all formalities were completed. The apartment sold for $320,000, $160,000 each. The cabin sold for $13,000, $6,500 each. Joint accounts contained $5,000, $2,500 each. The divorce was formalized in early July. 10 years of life together had ended. Margaret went outside clutching the document. It was strange, not painful, not joyful, just strange, as if one chapter of life had closed and a new one hadn't begun yet. An interval, a pause between inhale and exhale. She called Rachel. "That's it, officially free." "Congratulations. How do you feel?" "I don't know. Some kind of emptiness." "That's normal. It'll pass. You know what? We need to celebrate. Come over, we'll have a girls' night. Wine, pizza, TV shows, like in the good old college days." Margaret smiled. "Good idea. I'll be there in an hour." But instead of going to her friends, she suddenly turned toward the station, the same one where it all began. She walked past platforms, past kiosks, found the turnover stand. Dorothy was at her usual spot, laying out fresh baked goods. "Dorothy," Margaret called out to her. The woman turned around, and her face broke into a smile. "Maggie, how glad I am to see you. So did you win?" "I won. Thanks to you, among others. Your testimony really helped." "Oh, please, I just told the truth." Dorothy wiped away a tear. "Well, that's wonderful. Men like that need to be punished. And you? Where are you living? Working?" "Working at my old place. Rented an apartment. Small for now, but my own. I'm saving money from the divorce. I'll buy something decent." "Good girl. Smart." Dorothy took out a turnover, held it out. "Here, take this. With cabbage fresh. Enjoy." "Thank you." Margaret took the turnover, breathed in the familiar smell, exactly the same ones she'd taken that day when everything collapsed, and began anew. "The main thing is don't despair," Dorothy said instructively. "Life is long. Everything will still happen. Love and happiness. You'll see." Margaret nodded, said goodbye, and walked away. She sat on a bench by the platform, ate the turnover, watched trains arrive and depart. People boarded cars, left somewhere, started journeys, or returned home. At the end of July, Margaret received an offer to transfer to another company branch. New York, position of chief accountant, salary 40% higher. She agreed without hesitation. A new city, new people, a new life. Just what she needed. The move took a week. She rented a one-bedroom apartment in a residential area not far from work. Hung curtains, bought a small table, 2 chairs. Home. Her own home, where there were no lies, betrayal, pain. Work absorbed her completely. New team, complex tasks, responsibility. Margaret threw herself into it head first. It helped not to think, not to remember, not to regret. Sometimes she wondered, what became of Andrew? Was he living with that woman, raising his son? Was he happy? But she didn't seek answers. That was his life, not hers. They no longer intersected. Rachel called once a week, asked how things were, encouraged her, invited her to visit, promised to come to New York for the weekend. Margaret was grateful for this friendship. Without Rachel, she wouldn't have made it. At the end of August, she took a week's vacation, decided to go to the ocean, finally take that trip that hadn't happened in May. Bought a train ticket to Miami Beach, booked a small hotel on the shore. The day of departure turned out sunny and warm. Margaret arrived at the station an hour before departure, walked onto the platform, found her car, stood at the footboard, looking at the conductor who was checking tickets. A year ago, she'd stood exactly like this, getting ready to board a train that would have taken her away from the truth. But she didn't board. Dorothy stopped her, grabbed her arm and showed her reality. Now Margaret was standing by a train car again. But this was a different train. The right one. One that was taking her where she wanted to go. By her own choice, with her own money, into her own life. She climbed into the car, found her compartment, settled by the window, took out a book. The train started moving. Platforms, buildings, forests floated past the window. The city was left behind. Ahead was the ocean. The week in Miami passed like in a fog. Margaret walked along the boardwalk, swam, sunbathed, read, slept, ate fresh fruit, didn't think about anything, just lived, here and now. On the 5th day, she was sitting in a cafe on the shore, drinking coffee and watching the waves. At the neighboring table, a man of about 40 settled, pleasant appearance, gray at the temples, calm gaze. He was reading a magazine, occasionally glancing at the ocean. Their eyes accidentally met. He smiled, nodded. Margaret smiled back. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" he said. "Yes," she agreed. "Are you here on vacation?" "Yes. And you?" "I live here. Moved 6 months ago from Boston. Work remotely. Decided to change climate." They started talking. His name was Nathan. He was a programmer, a widower, lost his wife 2 years ago. No children. Moved south to start over, leave the pain behind. Margaret told about herself. Not everything, just the basics. Divorce, moved to New York, new job. Didn't mention Andrew's betrayal. Didn't want to remember. Nathan listened attentively, nodded, asked questions. It was easy to talk with him. Relaxed, without tension and falseness. "You know," he said, finishing his coffee, "I have a boat. Small but sturdy. Tomorrow I'm planning to go out to sea at sunset. Want to keep me company?" Margaret thought. A year ago, she would have been scared, refused, made up an excuse. But now, "Yes," she said, "I'd love to." The next evening, they were sailing on the calm ocean. Nathan steered the boat confidently, easily. Margaret sat at the bow, her face to the wind. "Beautiful," she said. "Yes, that's why I moved here. Here you can breathe. You can live, not just exist." She nodded, understanding him. Existing and living were different things. The last 10 years, she'd existed. And now, for the first time, she was beginning to live. They returned to shore at dusk. Nathan walked her to the hotel. "Thanks for the company," he said. "It was pleasant." "For me too. Maybe we'll see each other again? You have 2 days left before you leave." "Maybe," Margaret smiled. They exchanged phone numbers. Margaret went up to her room, lay on the bed, looked at the ceiling and thought. Nathan was a good person. Interesting. Honest, as far as she could judge from one evening. Could something come of this? Too early to say. But there was a possibility. And that was heartening. The last 2 days they spent together. Walked, talked, laughed. Nothing serious, just pleasant company. But when the day of departure came, Margaret felt she didn't want to leave. "Right when you arrive?" Nathan asked, seeing her off at the station. "Definitely." "And come again. I'll be waiting." She smiled, waved her hand, and boarded the train. She returned to New York, rested, calm, tanned and smiling. Colleagues noticed the changes, paid compliments. Margaret thanked them and immersed herself in work. Nathan wrote every day, sent photos of the ocean, talked about his projects, was interested in her affairs. They called in the evenings, chatted about all sorts of nonsense. Didn't make plans, didn't make promises, just communicated. And that was good. A month passed. October painted New York in yellow-red colors. Margaret was walking home from work, admiring the autumn trees. Her phone vibrated. A message from Nathan. "I've been thinking, maybe I should come to New York for the weekend. I want to see you." Margaret stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. People rushed past, and she stood looking at her phone screen and typed an answer. "Come, I'll be glad." A second later came a reply, a smiling emoji. Margaret smiled and walked on. Leaves rustled underfoot, wind ruffled her hair. Ahead was the future. Unknown, but attractive. Without guarantees, but with hope. She walked past the station, the same one where a year ago her life had changed. Stopped, looked at the building, remembered Dorothy, who hadn't let her board the wrong train. Sometimes the most important thing in life is to stop in time, Not to board that train that's taking you nowhere. Not to enter that door behind which lies. Not to live in illusions, however beautiful they might be. Margaret sighed and walked on. Home. To her small apartment where hot tea, a soft blanket, and a new chapter of life awaited her. A chapter written by herself, honestly and sincerely.